Okay, everybody, activity number 3 is your last memory challenge for today. So this time, I will show you a photo of a crime scene. Okay, it is a crime scene. You will have 2 minutes to study the crime scene, and I want you to try to pay attention to all the small details in this room. So the first 2 activities I asked you to memorize. This time, I just want you to observe, take in some details, and at the end of 2 minutes, I'll take that picture away and then I'm gonna ask you 10 questions about the scene that you saw. So in your note-taking guide, you can go ahead and number 1 to 10. And you don't need to write down the questions that I'll ask you. I'll just ask the question, you write down the answer, okay? So you have 2 minutes to look at the scene, starting now. Here are the answers to those 10 questions. So compare your answers to these, check and see that you got them right, fill in the correct answer if you got it wrong. Number 1, what color coffee mug was in the picture? Yellow. Number 2, when was the deadline? Today. Number 3, what time was on the clock on the wall? 11:05. Number 4, how many sticky notes were on the whiteboard? There should have been 6. Number 5, which of the following was not in the picture? A stapler, a trash can, or a printer? You should have chosen stapler. Number 6, what was the name on the plaque on the desk? It was Brian. Number 7, what color was the victim's shirt? Blue. Number 8, how many plants were in the picture? 2. Number 9, what was the color of the marker in the desk drawer? That marker was green. And number 10, where was the book in the picture? On a box, in the trash can, or under the body? And the answer is on a box. Activity number 3 should have been the easiest out of all the activities we did today. And that's because I told you what was coming ahead of time. I told you it was going to be a photo, and then I wanted you to look for specific details and whatnot. And I gave you 2 minutes to observe and think about those things over and over for 2 minutes. So that's just one of the reasons why it was the easiest activity today. You probably got 8 to 10 of those right. Whereas in activity 1, you might have added some words. Activity 2, you might have missed some objects. So I know it sounds really random, but all of these things have to do with eyewitnesses. So the date today is September 16th. So think back to 6 weeks ago to the day. What was that date? You can use a calendar to look at this. Now, without using social media or talking to your parents, guardians, friends, anybody else, try to remember exactly what you were doing 6 weeks ago to the day, from start to finish. Chances are you can't remember very much of what you were doing that long ago. So when you witness a crime happening, and 6 months, 1 year, 2 years after, the police come sometimes and ask you what you remember, how accurate do you think those details are going to be? And this is why it's important to think about eyewitnesses. Are they really valid? A lot of times it's going to depend on how much time has passed since they saw whatever it is that they saw. And there are also a lot of factors that might affect how they remember the things that they did see. What are some factors that might affect how people remember things that they see? One of those factors is age. So when asked to recall an event or situation, children tend to perform well and the elderly tend to perform well. But everyone in between is kind of average or less than average, which is very interesting. And part of that reason that children perform well is because a lot of kids think that if they lie, they get in trouble, whereas adults, teenagers, young adults, middle-aged adults, they have not necessarily had practice at lying, but they're older and they're better at hiding things that they're trying to hide sometimes. And so that can kind of play a role. If you saw something and you think that you might get in trouble for it, as an adult, you're more likely to lie. Another factor is the race of the witness. So this is called the cross-race effect. Super interesting. Okay, so what the cross-race effect is, it means that me, as a white person, I am able to better recognize differences in other white people, because that is my race. That's the race I'm most familiar with. Whereas Hispanic individuals can easily tell the difference between other Hispanic individuals. Likewise, for Black persons, Asians, Indian Americans, whatever your specific race is, you're more likely to recognize differences as opposed to me looking at another race. Because I'm not as familiar with that race, it's more difficult for me to distinguish differences. So if I'm witnessing a crime that's been committed by a different race, I, as the eyewitness, am more likely to suspect the wrong person or misremember what I saw because it's a different race that I'm observing. Other factors, drugs and alcohol, are always factors that influence things. Investigators sometimes will put pressure on an eyewitness to remember. sometimes use coercion to plant thoughts in their heads. Other witnesses can be factors. If there are other witnesses present, they are more likely to influence each other, and the story will become biased or swayed in one direction. A couple other factors: if the witness has been through trauma, if their adrenaline was pumping at the time that they saw something, they're more likely to misremember or over-exaggerate or under-exaggerate something. Stress, media, and police lineups. A lot of times eyewitness misidentification comes because the police bring a lineup of, say, 5 suspects, and they say, which one was the guy or which one was the girl that did this? And if you only have those options, there's a lot of pressure on the eyewitness to choose one. And that one that they choose may or may not be correct. So eyewitnesses are important because if an eyewitness misidentifies an offender, the wrong person is going to end up in prison. So it's really important to understand how these things work.